Hey guys, my name is Cassidy and you're watching That Spooky Lifestyle, where we bring the ooky, the spooky, the creepy, and the crawly into our everyday lives. Today we're going to be talking about the infamous Ouija board, spirit board, talking board, whatever you want to call it. We're going to be going over all the ways that you can properly use one. We're going to be talking about how to protect yourself, some best practices, as well as debunk some of the more popular rules circulating the internet about these boards. If you're new to my channel, we are going to be talking about these boards while I finish my makeup. So if you're ready to get started, let's dive right in. So if you're thinking of doing a Ouija session yourself, the first thing we need to talk about are the actual spirit boards themselves. Really consider what kind of materials you want to work with personally. Myself, I don't like working with anything that's plastic or cheap, like most of the Ouija boards that you can get at the toy stores. I'm not sure about resin, but I definitely love to invest in one and like have it hang on the wall or just be up for display somewhere. I think that would be really cute. My favorite material to work with is wood. It also reminds me of like olden vintage times, like back in the day when spiritualism was just starting and people were really into seances and Ouija boards and things like that. It really just kind of ties the history of Ouija boards into the actual board you have. So for me personally, my first choice is wood. However, I've also seen Ouija boards that are available in metal. So again, it's up to your personal preference what kind of material you want your board to be made out of. And you don't just want to connect with the materials, you really want to connect with the design. When you look at your own Ouija board that you've invested in, you should want to work with it. It should make you feel comfortable and excited. After you've chosen what kind of board you want, the next step is to decide what kind of session you're going to have. Are you going to be doing this in a group? Are you going to be doing this by yourself? Now I know there's a very popular rule out there that says you can't do Ouija boards by yourself, and we're going to get to that a little later in the video, so I'm not going to touch on it now, but I'm just saying the next step, really consider what kind of Ouija session you're going to be having and start to plan for it a little bit. So if you're going to be doing your Ouija session in a group, remember that there are multiple ways that you can do this. It doesn't have to be just everyone sitting around the dining room table, all putting their hands on the board and trying to talk to someone. You can really get creative in the experience that you want everyone to have. A fun spin on a Ouija session could be if there were two of you, one person could work the board by themselves, and they should be blindfolded. So if you did this and maybe changed the orientation of the Ouija board, then they absolutely could not influence the answers that you were getting. I think this would be a very interesting spin on doing a Ouija session. The other person who isn't working the board could be writing down the letters or the answers, just so that you both kind of play a role in what's going on. But remember, you can really get creative in what you want to do with this board. I think people get stuck into that very traditional sense of we need to ask, you know, really crazy questions. We all have to have our hands on the board at all times. We got to do so many circles. Like, I think people just get too lost in the propaganda and don't get creative with how they want their own Ouija experience to be. But backtracking a little bit, whether you're doing this by yourself or in a group, you really should have writing utensils nearby so that you can write down all of the questions you want to ask along with all of the answers that you're getting. Because it's also fun to reflect on it later. You know, maybe each Halloween you do kind of a tradition of doing this, or maybe it's like once a month you get together and do this. I think that would be super fun. Also, to touch on, if you're planning on doing this for Halloween, which I'm sure a lot of you are, what you should consider doing is to get everyone comfortable enough with the Ouija board and Ouija sessions to do them on their own. And then when you get together for Halloween, everyone can kind of bring their own experiences and techniques that you can all try together. And so then it really will be like a group collaborative effort rather than just one person telling everyone what to do. Everyone can kind of bring their own experience and and just make it a totally different kind of session. So after you've figured out what kind of session you want to have, you're then going to want to focus on different ways you can protect yourself, make yourself feel safe and comfortable while you're performing these Ouija sessions. So the first thing you should do before starting one of these sessions is to cleanse your board and cleanse the planchette, which is the little kind of triangle thing you use to move around the different letters on the board. You don't want to bring any negative energy or bad vibes into a new session or anything like that. You don't want any residual business left over, so definitely cleanse your board, cleanse your planchette before and after you use them, just to be safe. A lot of people use the smoke of sage to cleanse items, and then on top of that they'll use Palo Santo, like the smoke of Palo Santo, to bring in positive energy. You can also use herbs, runes, symbols, oils. There's a lot of items out there that are used to cleanse and a lot that are used to protect. So definitely do your own research in what makes you feel comfortable and what you personally enjoy using. Again, if you did this in a group, it would be really cool if everyone kind of brought their own cleansing and protecting stuff, just to add another like element to your session. You not only want to cleanse your board, but you want to cleanse the space that you're in as well as yourself. You don't want to be bringing in bad thoughts into a session like this. You really want to keep it fun and positive for everyone. So if you're in a bad headspace, or the room that you're in is just super dull and creepy or gives you bad vibes, like it's going to be a bad session. You really want to make the space that you're working in very relaxed and calming and quiet, so that it just helps bring those, you know, quieter energies out. For this, a lot of people like to light candles, dim the lights, some people light incense. Once you have your space set up and you're ready to begin your session, you're really going to want to focus your attention to the board. A way that people do this is to really just close your eyes and then basically speak your intentions into the air around you. Kind of like say what you're going to do. Like, I'm here to communicate with spirits of positive energy and good intentions. I've got my Ouija board. I'm ready to connect with you. So again, if you're doing this by yourself, you can just kind of speak it to the air around you. If you're doing this in a group, you should really appoint one person to be your guide for the evening, and they'd be the one to kind of speak this to the group and again to the area around you guys. Keep in mind, if you are doing this in a group, that guide should be the only person asking questions to the board. The group itself can ask questions to each other, but if you're actually going to put your hands on the board and ask the question, just keep it to the one person. Kind of think of it like you're in a really busy room, and if everyone is trying to talk at the same time, everyone asking different questions is also going to result in everyone else answering a bunch of different questions as well, right? If you bring in that chaotic, busy energy of a bunch of different questions, you're going to get that in return in your answers, and it might be overwhelming or just not make any sense. So with every session, you should start off with just really simple questions like, what color is my hair? What color is the wall? Just something simple like that that can be really just one-word answers. And it would be good to kind of jot down the questions that you guys want to do beforehand, or at least a general direction that you'd like to go. So after you've fired off a few simple questions and have sort of got the hang of it, again, how long this will take will depend on each person, each session. Might take 5 minutes to get into the groove, might take 35 minutes, you don't know. So just go at your own pace and see what happens. But once you feel comfortable with the answers you're getting and how you're asking the questions and how the communication is going, you can move on to more complicated questions. I'm going to give you guys some ideas of more complicated questions just because I'm assuming you're going to go and try this after you watch this video. Some more complicated questions you could ask would be something like, have you had more than one life in this world? You can also get more personal with your complicated questions, like if there's a really specific situation that you want to ask about. The best way to do this is to explain the situation and then ask questions like, what expectations should I have? What elements could be affecting my situation that I'm unaware of? When should I take action to resolve this? Where should I start searching for answers? If you're looking for more question question prompts, what you can do is actually look up questions that are good for asking tarot cards, because questions that are good for tarot are also good for Ouija boards and spirit boards because they all kind of run on the same line. However, if you've used a spirit board before, a good question to ask is, have we communicated before? Because some people like to use Ouija boards and tarot cards to talk to their spirit guides, if that's something that you believe in. So people who've used a spirit board more than once will ask a question like that to see if they're talking to the same spirit that they have been previously. Also, a reminder that spirit boards are just giving you an idea. You're just asking spirit their opinion. Is it going to tell you the future and be accurate all the time? No, it's just like asking a human, what do you think's gonna happen? Now, there are some questions you should avoid asking, but not because they're evil, because they're just fucking rude. Don't ask questions like, what year did you die? When did you die? How did you die? Were you murdered? Are you gonna possess us? Like, if I was a spirit and some random stranger I had never met before picked up a Ouija board and started asking me all these personal, in-depth questions like that, I would start haunting them just because they were being a dick. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, be respectful with the questions that you ask. You ask about trouble, you're looking for trouble. That's all I'm gonna say. So when you're using a spirit board, just remember to be clear in the questions you're asking and respectful with the questions you're asking. I also want to touch on, I know that it's popular to use these boards in graveyards, and in my personal opinion, as long as you're being respectful, like, don't put the Ouija board over someone's grave, don't sit on someone's grave. There's always a bunch of grass area that's off to the side. If that's where you're at, then I personally think it's fine. I mean, you will have to check with your local laws, because sometimes going in the graveyard at night or on Halloween is actually illegal. So just, you know, that's not my business to look into, that's your own. Again, when you're doing a session like this, just be respectful no matter where you are or what you're doing. Don't be those jerks that are like, yeah, we're gonna sit on top of grandma's grave and do a Ouija board. Like, be smarter than that. Now, if you're using a Ouija board and it starts to feel weird or kind of overwhelming, that doesn't always mean that it's a bad spirit, which I think a lot of people kind of just immediately go to. What it can be is that there's just too many spirits and like too much energy going on. If you're doing this in somewhere, especially like a graveyard, it might feel just overwhelming in general, especially if you don't do Ouija a lot. You can always just stop, just close the session. You can always do that, always. So, you know, just don't always take it as, oh my god, this is such a negative thing, oh my god, there's a demon, oh my god, we're gonna die. That's not the case most of the time. A lot of the time it's just people overreacting or just getting overwhelmed with the situation or the energy that's around them. So just keep that in mind. So if you do get into a position where you feel like the energy is just too much, or like they're being, you know, the energy is too noisy is a good way to put that, close the session. I would be like, fine, you know what, you guys aren't in the mood right now, this isn't working for me, I am closing the session, and when I close the session, you need to leave. Just like asking someone to leave your house, it's the exact same thing. Again, always be respectful. Like, I really appreciate your guys' time, but right now I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm not getting the messaging or communication I want to, and I'm closing the session, and as I close the session, you need to leave. And then drag your planchette to goodbye and close the session. So when the session is over, don't just close the session with your Ouija board, close the session with your space. Like, literally blow out the candles, turn on the lights, move everything back to where it used to be, cleanse everything again. So think of it like you're working from home, and say the room that you use as your office you also use as something else, like maybe it's your makeup room or your art room or whatever. When you're working, you bring out your work computer, you know, all your notes, whatever, and when you're done working, you put that to the side so that when you're sitting there doing your art or whatever, it doesn't feel like the same space. That's what you should be doing mentally always with your Ouija board. I think a lot of the time people psych themselves out thinking that, you know, stuff is still going on, and when really it's like, no, your house just makes weird creaky noises. It did that before the session, but since you didn't actually like cleanse a space, you still mentally have that connection to that Ouija session. So everything you hear and everything you see is just like 9 times spookier because you constantly refer back to like, well, did I notice that before the session? Make sure to make a mental distinction between when you're doing a session and when this is just my house and it's just regular, or when the space is no longer like that Ouija spirit board space. Make sure to like make a distinction between the two. So when you close a Ouija session, close it. Turn on the lights, blow out the candles, sage the space, air the space out. Make sure that when you walk into it, it feels warm and inviting again. It shouldn't be spooky, shouldn't be eerie, shouldn't feel busy. Open up some windows. So just like any tool that you use, whether it's for baking or construction or spiritualism, store it with respect. Don't just throw the Ouija board and the planchette in the back of your closet in a tub somewhere. Wrap it in something, a cloth or silk, and make sure that you're storing it somewhere where it's not going to get wrecked or ruined or damaged. Again, just like your tarot cards, you wouldn't just slough them somewhere to get bent or ripped, especially if you use them quite often. Okay, so now we're going to jump into some of the more popular rules that are circulating about these boards. A lot of them have just been popularized by Hollywood or media, things like that. So I just wanted to quickly run through some. So rule number 1 is be respectful of spirits. This one, obviously, I agree with. If you're going to be doing something like this, don't ask dumb questions, don't be disrespectful, don't do anything like that. If you ask for trouble, you're going to get trouble. So only work with positive energy. Don't be out here like, yeah, I'm going to summon a demon, nothing bad's going to happen. You know. So another rule I've come across is never use a Ouija board when you are in a bad mental space or if you're physically sick. This one I also agree with, just because if you're already in a bad mood, you're gonna have a bad session. Like, no matter what you're doing, if it's tarot, working with your crystals, anything like that, if you're in like a funk, you're gonna have a funky session. So another rule is don't play by yourself, and I completely disagree with this. If you're okay with doing tarot by yourself, palm readings, you know, tea readings, working with crystals, anything like that, it is the same thing. Ouija board is just a tool, a spirit board is just a tool, just like tarot is. So if you're okay with doing tarot by yourself, you should be completely fine doing a Ouija board by yourself. That is something that has just been popularized by Hollywood. So there's another rule of you should never play in a cemetery. Again, this one more just goes back to the respect thing. As long as you're respectful, as long as you know you're not breaking things, Ouijaing on people's graves, you'll be fine. Again, it's not like a, oh my god, you're gonna get possessed, a demon's gonna show up, oh my god, like, relax. There is another rule out there that says you should never burn a Ouija board because it lets all the spirits out. And again, I think this is more of a respect thing. If you're using it as a tool, don't wreck it, don't fuck around with it. There's another rule out there that says you should never leave the planchette on the board when you're not using it. Again, personal preference. If that really bothers you, wrap your planchette in a little baggie or a, like, you know, a little cloth so that it's not physically touching your board. But at the end of the day, if you're not using it, you're not using it. And a lot of the shops you'll see have the planchettes on the board to show you what it is, and that's how they store them. And if they're not getting, you know, weird, creepy hauntings, why should you? The next rule is that you can never use a Ouija board more than once because spirits get attached to it, and I completely disagree with this. What I think happens personally is people have bad experiences with their boards because they don't cleanse it, they don't cleanse their space, they don't mentally make that distinction between this is when I'm using spirit board, this is when I'm not. And so if you had a bad experience, mentally you associate that with the board, so the next time you go to use it, it's always going to remind you of like, oh, that time I had that bad experience, and you keep having bad experiences, that's all that board is ever going to be to you. So another rule is never play at your own house. Listen, if you're trying to contact, you know, like evil spirits and bring in trouble, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that in your own backyard. If you are just trying to ask spirit questions and talk to your spirit guide, totally fine to do it in your own house. I've also seen that, you know, if you're doing Ouija in a group, you need to circle the board so many times to give it a certain amount of energy. It's personal preference. If you guys do Ouija on your own and you don't do that, don't do it in a group just because, you know, the internet told you to. That's absolute crap. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable and feel like you're ready to begin a session. With some people it's circling the board, with others it's lighting candles, whatever works for you. Now I've also came across a lot of rules that are like if the board starts counting down from 10 to 0 or backwards through the alphabet, or if there's a zigzag pattern or the four corners of the board, there's a lot of like, oh my gosh, it's a demon sort of rules out there. And all I have to say on that is if at any point in your Ouija session or spirit board session you feel uncomfortable, just close the session. Keep in mind, a lot of the time it's not like, oh my god, it was a demon. A lot of the time it's just like, oh, that was too much energy or not the right energy, or just a spirit or energy that didn't agree with me, and that happens sometimes. Just like meeting people on the street, you're not gonna like everyone you talk to. Keep that in mind. So as a recap, what did we learn? Protect yourself, protect your space, be respectful of the spirits when you do talk to them, be respectful of the boards and the tools that you use. Don't work with a Ouija board if you're feeling down, if you're sick, or if you aren't sober. That's also another one to consider. Only work with energy that's positive, that has good intentions, good vibes, all of that. As long as you're using a spirit board for positive reasons, to have a good experience, to have fun, you're going to have a good session. As long as you aren't looking for trouble or trying to call trouble, or when you start to feel like maybe this is weird and maybe this is trouble, close the session. You will be absolutely fine. Don't over stress about this. I can't pinpoint that enough. Again, if you use tarot cards, a Ouija board is no different. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. Definitely subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so you don't lose me in the social media void. Check me out on Instagram if you want more witchy content. Find me on Facebook if you enjoy Halloween memes. I share a lot of those over there. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I will see you guys in my next video.